So yeah, people that grew up here in South Florida, you know, especially from Palm Beach to Miami, and you're in the fishing world your whole life, you just kind of take it for granted, you know, and you don't realize that there's so many people out there, the rest of the world are looking in and wish that they knew the things that we take for granted.
Yeah.
And
the optics have changed a lot.
Yeah, things are changing fast. But, you know, I grew up down here on Los Osos Boulevard, and my dad was big into the offshore scene. And from the time I could talk and walk, you know, fishing was just part of life. But having you sitting in my living room today is kind of neat, because I was just a kid. I mean, literally on my skateboard rolling up and down A1A, and I knew Steve Kantner. I knew who Steve Kantner was, and I knew that, you know, that you fished.
Very flattered to hear that,
dude. All of us kids knew who Steve Kantner was. I mean, you know, and you grow up and you realize that that guy that was fishing around the canals and stuff, and you'd see on the beach, is a real predominant voice in the sport fishing world. And there's so many of us down here that just kind of take that for granted. You know, like if you're from New Jersey or Atlantic City, yeah, you know, you're into fishing and there's a coast there or whatever, but it's not 24/7, 365 days a year.
No, you got Jersey Shore and you got Dion.
Right?
I mean, yeah.
But guys, this is Steve Kantner, famous fisherman here in Fort Lauderdale, esteemed author, right, a number of books, and we're real excited to have him today on the Reel Guy Podcast. Steve, thanks for coming over. Thanks for coming in.
Real happy to be here. Very, very, very proud to be here.
Well, you know, it's good to have you. I've always considered you somebody that I would not only look up to, because, you know, you're older and stuff like that, but you've always fished, like never not fished. Right. So like there's certain people that you put on your pendulum and you say, okay, what's Kantner doing right now? Oh, Kantner's up there, you know, Hope Sound getting pompanos and stuff right now. And then you go to the next guy, okay, what's John Tedder doing right now? Oh, Tedder's on A-Dock, and, you know, he's doing some snook fishing late at night. And then you check in with Tom Green or maybe Copeland, or, you know, like you were talking about Frank Johnson.
Yeah.
And, you know, you had your people that you always wanted to know what they were doing, because they were what you would wanted to see. You wanted them to be your peer.
Yeah. It's something else, too. Many of us, particularly when fishing started to get some legs, and people like myself that didn't have a lot of seed cash to get started, we had to make a living doing something that somebody else wasn't doing, and that's where this land captain thing came from me. I became intrinsically interested in fly fishing when I was in my late teens, when I was in the Army. And where I was, we didn't have an opportunity. I mean, it wasn't like Montana or whatever, but I knew that I could bring some of this stuff down home if I understood, if I learned the physical moves involved, and I could, you know, parlay it into the kind of fishing we have here. And I remember many times, I remember wading out, remember the Coast Guard flats, I'm sure you'd, more than anybody. Yeah. I remember wading out waist deep and throwing, and actually during the daytime hooking tarpon and fishing, shooting headlines and catching little baby kingfish when we used to be able to sneak in the port.
Right.
Yeah, I mean lots of them. And all sorts of stuff we caught. And of course in the back canals and whatever. And I know your friend O'Gorman, and he's got some video that's, I didn't know this stuff lived here. I'd be afraid to fall in one of these canals. Yeah. But yeah, we did it, and we had fun with it. And there wasn't, I was out here when they dug Alligator Alley, and we saw it as a kind of a cool place to go. And we'd go out with our dates in college. We'd drink beers and cook hot dogs. But we never had an idea at the time the vastness of this industry and how it would grow, nor the, can I call it the eco industry that has grown around it?
Yeah, you can call it that.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, I even have like ecologically sensible clothes on. It's the only two pairs I have.
There's like a fishing uniform now.
Yeah, you got to have it, right?
You know, it's funny. I was trying to explain to my kid how the IGFA used to be. when it was just a little tiny 30 by 30 cubicle down on A1A in Los Olas, and there was a little old lady that worked in there, and then you could walk in there and go through the files and look at people's world records, and maybe they had a photo of something, right?
Yeah.
And then, the kid today, she thinks of the IGFA like this huge museum with all these, famous people in it. And
yeah. Here's the bad news. It's like the Hotel California. It's there. Nobody can get in. You can get out once you're in there, but nobody can get in there.
But it's just crazy how, what used to be just a little room of files turns into this huge IGFA world of people now, and blown way out of, in my opinion, blown way out of proportion. And people from the outside looking in just think it's like bigger than life. And really, the fundamentals of the IGFA is no different today than it was when that little cubicle was down there.
Oh.
They just promote it as being so grandiose.
Remember when they used to be up on Federal Highway in Pompano?
Now that I don't remember.
Okay, it was up about McNabb Road or whatever. I used to work for a life insurance company that was Life of Virginia. I worked for them for years, and it was up there. And we used to go over there after work, and you could sign in, and they'd sign you stuff. They'd give you a cassette, or it wasn't a cassette then, a movie, and you'd play it, and you'd write on there, Zane Grey fishes for... the Tahitian silver marlin, and you'd watch it for a while, and you just chronicle, a few remarks and stuff. But I remember doing that, and I remember, the deal with Harry, E.K. Harry was the president and started the library.
Now, was the thing in Pompano after A1A or before?
After.
Okay, because I didn't know it. I didn't know what happened to it after it left.
I remember going down there with Scott Boyd and having lunch or breakfast with Peter Godby, and he had just loaned. He had a 16-0 pen, and this is when you could use cow's blood for chum and everything else. Right. And they caught the guy caught the 2,500 or 2,600 pound white shark. These guys, these Australian guys, I mean, the little guy, they're born, they have like 18-inch arms, and they get bigger as they get older. And they have barber chairs on these boats with footrests. They go out there and they'll have a whole dead steer step. And these things, they'll pick the one they want. These things 18 feet long and stuff. But we were actually having breakfast with Godby, who wrote an excellent book on Pacific fishing. Boyd and I, while Clive Green was the guy's name, was cranking this thing in out there in the Bay of Islands, wherever he was. I think it was the Bay of Islands.
Okay. The whole thing, started, I guess, with the IGFA having those records and stuff in their files. And then...
1939 is when they really cranked it.
Yeah, and then I guess it's just, it's been a storyline. It's been a storyline ever since. And then today, I don't know, I don't pay attention to it like I used to. There was times when, I was like, man, that guy did this and that guy did that. And, man, if I could do what he did.
They were heroes. They were heroes.
Exactly.
Guys like Lerner and these guys. They have this young lady, her name is Chizzy, Farrington. She was 19 years old, real good-looking girl, married somebody from, upper crust Manhattan or whatever. And she's over there on her grand tour after she graduated college. She's over there in France. She gets polio. Her arm gets boogered, her knee gets boogered. Here's this beautiful little chick that writes for Harper's and Vogue and everybody else. And she's there with her husband up there in Nova Scotia cranking in these 900-pound tunas. I mean, legit. I mean, those guys, there was no two ways of doing it, or let the little girl dance stuff or whatever, or back down on it. I mean, they...
Right.
Some of these women from back in the old days, man, they ate their young. I mean,
they were real sportsmen. They were real gamers. And let's bring that up. I mean, Steve's written multiple books over the years, but his latest book are the 50 women who fish, and it's a perfect timing, in my opinion, for this book, because, in my opinion, social media has skewed. To be polite, a lot of, especially the younger generation's perception on women who fish, because these kids, they see what's on social media.
Yeah.
And on social media, there's some of the women that actually, fish that are on there, but they don't get the millions of views, or the hundreds of thousands of views that the G-stringers get.
Right.
And it drives me crazy to think that my 13-year-old kid would look at these G-string anglers and think, wow, these are the girls of fishing.
That's what it takes.
Because it's not.
Everybody wants to be, I want likes. Give me, I want now. I want it all. Like, yeah.
Now, was any of that going through your mind when?
Oh, you bet. I laid this thing out like a battle plan ahead of time. And I very closely checked with some reliable sources to make sure. That's not to say, this is, to tell you the truth, the book is kind of a cross between Field and Stream and what's that one that I'm trying to think the one where there's a lot of tattletale stuff in there, because a lot of these girls come out and they do tell some stuff. I mean, famous ladies, Joan Wolfe, the first lady of modern fly fishing. She's been married, I don't know, 4 times. Said, I've told Vokey. She said, I made some mistakes that I'm not proud of. I know the woman, and I talked to her too. And I guess I didn't listen to the thing, but Vokey got a little chirpy with her and stuff, and told her, she said, you're really not the person to talk about this.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Vokey has a great selection of podcasts. But anyway, some of these girls, and I mean, Deborah Dunaway, she chased that. She wouldn't mind me saying it. I mean, she told me, when I met her, she was just brokenhearted. She went down with a date from Dallas to go, they were going to go diving down in the Virgin Islands, and they went aboard this guy's boat. Jerry Dunaway's got more money than
right.
God, and everything else. And her date started talking to Dunaway's sort of squeeze or whatever, and Dunaway was married. And she ended up talking to Dunaway half the night, and the other two, they were going to go diving the next day. The two of them were too green to go diving. So Dunaway just sat up there, and they went bebopping around and stuff and trolling some skip baits, and I believe she caught a sailfish or whatever, and she caught one I think in Mazatlan or something years before. So it was different. Here we're using light lines and stuff, and she said, girls today wouldn't like me saying this, but the first time I got a look at that man, I made up my mind I was going to have him. It took her 30 years.
Right, she got him though.
And in the end, when he finally passed, he took care of his kids, her kids, their whatever. He was a straight up guy.
A nice pleasant ending.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be. Hey, love is bumpy. I mean, love hurts.
It does. Now you reached out and did 50.
Oh, 50. Well, actually 60. I interviewed 10 of the dead, but they are not as contentious. Yeah,
that takes a lot of work, because it'd be hard for me to sit down and write 50 men anglers that I would actually write.
Listen, I had
about.
to renew my testosterone prescription when I did this. I'm serious. I mean, it was
a lot of energy. Yeah,
and the other thing is, a lot of them like to be editors, and there's some things you're good at. There's some things I'm good at. I'm no Hemingway, but what I kept trying to do was get these ladies to answer questions, and I'd call them on the phone, and I'd try to get them to really keep going.
Yeah, keep going. I'm a dumbass. I didn't turn my phone off before we started the recording.
But anyway, I would go and I would really drill them. I'd say, this isn't a Facebook post, babe. Come on. Right. I mean, this is the way you feel about it, I want you to tell me how you feel about it. You let me write it. You just let me see the way you feel it. And sometimes it would be the very, very last question. One of these ladies, young, she's not even 30 years old yet. She's got more plaudits. I mean, she's a guide. She's a this. She used to work. She's a captain with I don't know how many 100-ton master's license. And she actually worked. She's an animal trainer, training whales and porpoises and otters and stuff to guard these deep water submarine bases. And I mean, I don't think they were teaching them how to be nice to divers and stuff, if you know what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
They were real people doing real things.
Real things.
And yeah, it wasn't a photo op. It wasn't, something to gain popularity. They were living their life, and they were real fishing people.
The one I know, the one where I got chased, Cockig and I were kidding about this yesterday, the one where where I got chased with the panther, she was asking me that story. She said, she says, I've told that story 50 times. Did you ever see her? And I said, I just called her. And this is Diana Rudolph, anyway. And Diana Rudolph ranks in my book. I've never seen a female fly cast that well in my life.
Really?
Really. I mean, it's really...
Top of the top, huh?
She can stand here in a wind and put a loop in a mouse's ear.
Wow.
At 80 yards out there. And, I mean, she's the what do you call it? The cut line was like a predator, and boy, she was. And we were talking, and you can read it in the book. She comes out and says, I'd never had a psychiatric problem in my life. And she's hanging around with this guy for about 10 years, which, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, that's,
yeah, they might as well be hooked, right?
Yeah. And I get pregnant. We have this kid. Within a day after I have the kid, I plunge into this incredible depression. I wanted this child. The child is not normal. Everything is good. And I spent a year on, just shovelfuls of psychiatric medication. It came out of absolutely nowhere. And my wife worked in the court system and everything. She said, that PSD or PPD, postpartum depression, that's a murder defense. And this girl had never told anybody. And so telling this story, this girl is really bouncy. And you say, man, when she comes out with this, think of the good that those other women who maybe feel strange feelings and stuff like that.
Sure.
There's another lady in here who says the reason she guides is because she's a nut. She suffers from endogenous depression. But when she's up there, this is a different one from British Columbia. When she's got a party and they're going down this river throwing, and she knows, she's between the devil and deep blue sea. She doesn't have a chance to think about her broken love affairs or any of her other stuff. And it keeps her up to speed, and she loves the outdoors. She got hooked. This guy at work, he said, when I graduated college, I worked at this lodge as a domestic. And this guy was working as a fishing guide. He said, let's go for a helicopter ride one day. And she said, that was it. He caught 2 of these bright spring steelheads, and I was never the same again.
All right. That's, so the amount of energy you put in that, you haven't put that kind of energy in a book in a long time, huh?
I try to put as much energy into everything I do as I can. As I get older, and I guess as the time gets shorter, the time becomes more, it's more valuable.
Well, I'm really glad you wrote the book, because I think that there's a respect factor in fishing that is being lost. And
Yeah.
It's being lost quickly. I mean, when I grew up, there was the older guys that fished, and you respected those people.
Right.
Whether you liked them or not was irrelevant.
No, fishing was always that way.
Yeah, whether you liked them or not was irrelevant. But you knew that they were putting in 100%. You knew that they were putting in the effort, whatever it took. And then you knew that you might be able to learn something for them.
Yeah, you knew what size hook they used.
Right. You knew that they could make you better.
Right.
And I don't know if the younger generation, or even some of the older guys, even realize, just like other athletes, you can look at them, break them down, understand where they can help you, where they may be hurting you. But the respect factor, I don't think is there. I don't think it's there anymore.
I still lift weights at my condominium with my high school football coach. He's 90 years old now, 5 days a week. He's stiffer now. I don't want to use the term, and I'm not much better, but we're in there. And I'm talking serious full body workouts and stuff like that. He played at one time when the NCAA rules were different. He was I think he was at University of Cincinnati or Ball State or one of them. He coached one of the teams while he was basketball while he was playing professional baseball for the other. And he's known, the guy's name's Bill Hughley. He's the head of the, whatever they call it over here, for the Century Club at Lauderdale High School.
I was going to say, is that Hughley from Lauderdale High School?
Yeah.
Get out of here. You work out with Hughley?
Yeah. You and I are buddies.
2 years I went to Fort Lauderdale High School, and 2 years I went to St. Thomas Aquinas. But
Yeah.
Hughley was still a coach when I was at Lauderdale High School.
Yeah.
That's
The director.
hilarious.
Oh, no. He's a doozy. And it finally, and boy, I'll tell you, I won't make any comments about political alignments, but let's say that his is about like mine.
Yeah. Yeah, let's leave all that stuff out of this one. But I don't know if you guys know it or not, but Steve was an intricate part in winning a small battle in a huge war here in Fort Lauderdale. What was that, maybe 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah, it
5 or
was.
6
And that's
years
when
ago?
I first I didn't get to say anything. You were signed up, but you really mustered. You really rallied the troops. And what it was, this guy who's our mayor now, this is my point of fact, he used to be the District 2 commissioner. I live in District 2 now.
Right.
But a woman who was, I guess, one of his contributors or one of his whatever.
Money people.
Raised this, gotten a panties in a knot over kids fishing off the beach and stuff, and they turned it into this turtle dragon, leaving junk on the beach, wire, all this kind of stuff. And best as we could figure, all it was a couple of guys, a lot of times getting ready with business wear on to go to work, walking the beach with a fly rod at 6 o'clock in the morning in the summertime when there was no surf. And, you're not exactly yelling to each other. And she'd look out her window or whatever and harumph,
Right.
I don't like it. And she brought these bunny huggers in there. I remember sitting there and these guys snarling and making up these stories.
Let me summarize it, because we might be talking past some of the people in the audience. See, down here in Fort Lauderdale Beach, we have a very nice place to go down and fish the beach, and people have been doing it forever. And I don't know, a few years ago, the cops started coming down there and throwing people off the beach, and kind of enforcing some laws that weren't actually there. And next thing I hear through the grapevine, Steve and another longtime Fort Lauderdale fisherman, Carl Ball, found out that they were having this hearing about whether you were going to be able to fish on the beach or not. And at that time, our social media was absolutely blowing up. And I was like, this is an important topic that people aren't going to hear about.
You filled the commission chambers. I could have been pissed drunk, and I couldn't have fallen. I couldn't have found a place to hit the ground. It was the neatest thing I ever saw in my life. So help me.
So the hearing is going on in downtown Fort Lauderdale, and our social media network jumps on the back of Steve and Carl Ball, and we rally the troops, and we go downtown, and we represent the land-based fishermen to make sure that we're going to be able to fish here in Fort Lauderdale. And
we had the Sun Sentinel, and I used to write a blog for Andy Novak down at TMT&R, LMR. And that room, like I say, it was like it was there for Bundy's execution. It was really something.
Now, I think we had a few hundred people show up.
Easy.
To make sure that they would ban the fishing on the beach. And when they started that horse crap about the turtles and the monofilament on there was enough people there that knew that was bullshit.
Right.
That they actually laughed when the lady came out and gave her spiel about why fishermen were bad for the beach. And
fishy boys, bad boy.
But, to this day, it feels good when you win a battle like that.
Yeah, it does. Because, and it's the same thing. And if I can link it to one thing with the book. Listen, I'm not the greatest guy in the world. But one thing I did want to do with this book is I wanted to empower women. And the only backlash is now with this Year of the Woman and frankly, like this soccer contest and some of the aftermath from that and everything else, a lot of people are saying this Me Too stuff like, my dad didn't take me fishing. My husband wouldn't take me fishing. And, babe, we didn't know.
Right.
And we'd like you to go.
Right. It wasn't like we were trying to keep anybody down.
No,
It just,
you look good, and if it's just and you're my wife or my squeak or whatever, and we're going somewhere, and we're not doing this like selfies town or whatever. I like this.
well, it was masculinity, and it's back then it was normal. Now it's demonized.
That's right. It's toxic masculinity. Every time. You know what I do every night? I get myself a bottle of, I call it $2 Chuck. I get a bottle of inexpensive Australian Chardonnay, and I get a cigar, a real, what do you call it, Havana hand rolled from this guy that I know down in Miami. And I sit out there, and I might take 2 sips of the Chardonnay or 3 or 4, and I might take 1 puff of this, and I'm manic as hell. I told you I had to say that. I had to come clean. That's what's made me a writer, is suffering from bipolar disorder, being a drunk, and I'm learning in my old age an unhappy childhood. And man, that's a combination. You put those 3 together, and you got it.
Thanks for putting that out there for us, Steve.
Well, I wanted for the same thing like you talk about. It's a wellspring that everybody, you reach an age where you kind of got to come clean, and your motives have to be kind of known by people. You can get away with anything as long as you tell the truth about it.
That is 100% correct. We have this term we call real guy.
Yeah.
And of course, some people are what I would call real guy. They don't even know, what the hell I'm talking about. But one of the main factors, probably the backbone of being a real guy, is to be truthful and to be honest and not ride the wave of people's perception.
Right.
But actually...
Yeah, own it. If you did it, own it.
Right. And there was we're lucky in this industry because most of the people, that you bring up, like Frank Johnson and Tom Green and Co., they were real guys that actually did it.
Yeah.
But we also know the guys that got famous because of TV.
Yeah.
And...
I'm glad you asked me that. Last night I was running my Sweet Beaver on my 7.5-foot Kistler helium.
But you know what I mean? Like, and then so the people that actually live it and did it and never stopped doing it, you look back and you say, okay, well, this guy is a real guy. This guy was a TV celebrity who gave the perception that he was a real guy.
Yeah.
But he couldn't get a dozen baits, or you didn't pay attention where he was fishing on a weekly basis because it was irrelevant.
Right.
But the real guy was honest about what he would tell you or wouldn't tell you.
Right.
If he didn't want to tell you something, he'd straight up tell you. That's none of your damn business.
Right. You're stealing my craft is what I'd tell him. I'll tell you what to do. I'll tell you what size hook to use and what fly. But when you're following me around and I'm having to go with a canoe like this all day and you're trying to play catch up with me, you're stealing my art. You're stealing my craft.
Right. And there's a side of that. But then also, if you're honest and you're a real guy and you look and you see the other guys are really trying and you see them out there, whether it's beach fishing or bridge fishing.
You go over and help them.
Right. Then you help him. And then you help him because you know what he's trying to do. You know that it's not the easiest thing in the world. You know that he's dedicating his time and his energy and his money.
Right.
And oftentimes his life. So then the real guy reaches out his hand and is willing to help that person. Not tell him the world. Not give him all your secrets.
Right.
But acknowledge that that's a real guy.
Absolutely. And that's what you want to do. The guy that got me writing was a guy named Dick Kirkpatrick, who was the founding editor of National Wildlife. And Dick had one thing he used to tell me, pass it on.
Right.
And that's what we try to do. And I'm at a point now, I'm not going to kid myself. I'm not going to all of a sudden find the magic bullet, and I'm not going to, be the star of the ages or whatever. I'm working on a book of stories. It's a compendium of places I've been and some ridiculous stuff. Because let's be honest, what we really have now, we've got a resource in flux. It's not been real good what's happened here lately for a while. It's been very, very tough for people who've had to fish professionally. But one thing we can do is we can preserve some of these memories, nostalgia, with the idea that when young people see what we had once, that maybe this is recapturable, that we can have this again, and telling stories that motivate people, because these babes that buy this book, they can buy an airline ticket and they can go to where the things are biting, and it's not like me, where to me it's a drive out to Griffin Road or something like that.
Right. But, well, growing up and watching all the what I would call the people that I learned so much from, most of the people that I learned the most from never really had to tell me much. Like, I'll give you a good example. Mark Croca, when he used to fish canals here, right? I don't know, Mark's probably 15 years older than me.
Yeah.
Right? So Mark's got a successful inshore business, and he's fishing here in Broward County and through the intercoastal, and he's catching the snooks and the tarpon and the jacks, and me being 10 years old watching this, all the way up to I'm like 15, 16 years old watching this, and I can sit back, and all I needed to know was this guy can apply himself, make a living fishing.
Yeah.
That, to me, motivated me, taught me that, hey, Jeff, if you work hard at it, you can be like Mark Croca. He was in the same damn water as me. He was catching his bait as the same places that I was catching my bait. And to just have him lead by example meant more than anybody ever could have sat down and told me, like, secrets and tips. You know what I mean?
Actually, but the thing that's bad with guides, and I know I had to do this, and I fished, Brodsky used to take me out with him once in a while, and he had to make it, and this is carrying it one step further, where he would have to fish, as I'm sure you do, through the client's arms. And if the guy's jerky and he wants to this or he wants to that, you've got to have him you're trolling a live mullet, putt around the port, where flonk, you hear it, where he dips the tip, takes one step forward, one step back. No room for error. No take it out of gear. No let him run. No, he jostled it. You got to make it one-stop shopping for these people, because that's the thing where you or we pushed it further. What would happen if you let him run? Well, you'd get a dead bait back. What would happen if you this? What would happen if you that?
Yeah.
And we had to learn it the hard way. And, of course, when we were kids and you could see it because there was so much of it, you always want to let him take it, and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, with snappers, that's why I was a lousy snapper fisherman. Let him take it.
Well, I don't know if my clients realize it or not, but the circle hook has made their lives so much easier.
Indeed it has.
I mean, being a tarpon fisherman, in the old days we'd feed the fish and try to set the hook, and that was an art in itself. And to think that you could take somebody brand new, some pike fisherman from Minnesota, put him on the boat and teach him how to feed a tarpon in one day.
Yeah. It's real easy. Listen, I will tell you some stuff. Boyd told me some aphorisms. One was, what is the job of the customer? To pick up the slack and pay the bills.
Okay.
And the other thing is, why do women catch so many records? Why, Scott? Because they're not strong enough to break the line.
I like that.
But, of course, that's not true anymore.
Well, I got to tell you, women, in my opinion, especially in the tarpon game, were the best students.
Yeah.
There's not a big ego involved, so they listen to what you're saying.
That's number one. They'll listen.
Right. They'll listen to what you're saying. And then because, I don't know, maybe it's just not such a big deal, but they don't put so much pressure on themselves.
Yeah.
I get these really good fishermen, men that come with me. Well, I'll give you a perfect example. When I did the first time I did the TV show with Bill Dance, he went 0 for 18 on tarpon in one day. Not that he wasn't a good fisherman, but he would put more pressure on himself.
I think Mill did something like that one time. They just kept coming unstuck. And somebody else I know, Lefty, I don't remember.
Now Andy Mill went, what did he do? He blew 40. Remember, that was the story, right? He blew 40.
It was horrible. And you just get sick in the mind. The best thing to do then is to go somewhere, have a beer or two, take the fly off, put the rod somewhere that it can't send the vibrations at you or whatever, and then get out. What I used to do I'd get guys and women who just couldn't. They'd be tearing their underwear. Come over here, and we'd go to a field where hopefully there wasn't high grass and snip that fly off. And this was it was a little tougher with guys because their arms would be rigid and stuff like that. But to teach them how to make that lift, and it was only their elbow that slid on the shelf. And you had to be careful with girls because good touches and bad touches. And I'd explain this with them, and I said, and it was always, I never had a problem with it. But, and after a while, when they did that unrolling loop of line, I'd go out there, and I made a habit to fish small flies. I used a lot of marabou. And we'd go, and we'd find a place, and I'd have a machete, and I'd chop away a little bit of maiden cane or whatever, and they could throw that thing in there, and I had them catch 15, 18 snook, and I mean, some of them like 4, 5, 6 pounds and stuff, and get them in. And sometimes there were ones that were just incorrigible, you couldn't do anything with, and they'd say, you go ahead, I'd hook it here, they take it, and I just...
Yeah, no, I've always found, I mean, if guys could learn something from women through fishing, I think it'd be like, just cut the bullshit out. Yeah. Take the pressure off yourself, and just go out there and experience the day, and
have fun.
Have fun. Let it come to you. Don't try to force the issue, and
no selfies. No selfies. I only have my camera's. I have this little flip phone, and I'm an editor. I mean, a full-blown editor and an author. And this thing, I mean, I can't. It doesn't do nothing.
What's from a guy from your standpoint, older journalist, artist type, what's your take on selfies?
they selfies kill.
Selfies kill. Come on, explain yourself.
No, okay. Vicki and I went up to Alexander's for lunch here a couple of weeks ago. We went late, and all the millennials were not sitting there, and you see them, like there'll be 10 of them at the table, and they'll be texting each other, texting the girl that's
texting from across the table
across
to each
the table. And I'm thinking, I'm going to have some sushi, and I'm going to have this, and I'm going to have that, and I'm going to have a couple of cold beers and whatever, and I want to enjoy myself, and I don't want to hear this, and see if I got it right. Oh man, and I don't have any tats. I don't Nintendo to play Nintendo. I mean, I'm over it.
See, I'm halfway between you and the new millennial generation. I'm 51, but we got into that social media thing, call it 16, 17 years ago.
Yeah. And
then I think we were one of the first ones to actually do a social media event where we invited everybody that enjoyed the social media to come and, to be part of it, which we called Lunkercon, and we did it downtown.
Oh, wait, was that at the Downtowner?
Do you remember that? Well, we did the one at the Downtowner, but that's like our fifth one in Fort Lauderdale. I think the first one we ever did was at 15th Street Fishery, but the first time that the selfie thing got super crazy was about 5 years ago. We did it at Pirates Republic.
Okay.
And so everybody's coming in, and it's really, the event is basically, we call it Real Guys Hanging Out with Real Guys, because usually, fishermen, and like, this is a pleasure to sit down with you for an hour and to talk. Right. Because normally when I'd see you, it'd be like, oh, there's Steve, and I might give you a wave and you say hi.
Hey, dude, or gang signs. I don't even know what these signs mean.
So the whole idea behind Lunkercon was that, you just got to hang out, real fishermen hanging out with real fishermen. And if you weren't a pro, there was a place for you to meet the pros. And, you would just kind of...
Yeah, I loved going in a tackle store, and this is you've seen this, I'm sure, a million times. This is usually professional people, and they would put their hands in their back pockets, both their hands in their back pockets, and they would walk up, and they would always walk up behind you, and they'd say, "It's the best time to fish the Tamiami Trail, the outgoing tide," which is, that's like saying, who do you think's going to launch the next rocket? The question is so vacuous.
But the reason I brought up the social media event is because that was the first time, and that one was like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. That was the first time that I realized how crazy people were over selfies. Because as the crowd gathered and people were starting to murmur, and my wife's like, you got to go up there and say something. They came here because of, your social media. So I go up to the stage, and I take the microphone, and I welcome everybody there. And as soon as I get up there, everybody in the whole room, the cell phones went up. Boom! And I never experienced that before.
dog,
Right, I was just looking at everybody's phones and the selfies that were going on. And it was over and over and over again. And I'm just like, wow, this is important for these people.
This day I'm telling you about, I'll tell you the truth. This is the honest to God's truth. We're going to go, it's my birthday.
Right.
And Vicki and I are going to go to the iPhone store. And I'm going to get the fancy one. I forget what it is. So I can do all this stuff. So I can dial in drone strikes and do all this stuff. Okay. And we go over there to call Ocean Mile. Goodness, what are you doing? And she's sniffing around at stuff and everything. I said, come on. I said, get your ass out of here. We're not doing this. I'm not going to my grave with one of these freaking things beeping in my pocket. I promise. And we never did.
Well, now there's there's actually a backlash to the whole social media thing.
Yeah.
And I get it because well, one of the things that happens to me through social media, when we first started doing the fishing videos, we were showing blue marlin, we were showing bonefish, we were showing anything in between, but it was really about the fish,
Yeah.
and what it took to catch those fish. So at first people would say to me, oh, Jeff, do you know Steve Kantner? Or do you know Carl Ball? Or do you know Ray Rocher? Or do you know, and all the people that I worked hard to consider to be my peers, they would ask me about, and I liked it.
Yeah.
As time went on, it changed. And people said, hey, Jeff, do you know who Monster Mike is? And I knew Monster Mike because Monster Mike was trying to get his YouTube gang, his social media gang going. And we always would encourage it. So we reach out to Monster Mike. We do a small video with him, and it was a nice little thing. But then the next person would say, well, gee, do you know Dar Sizzle? And I'd be like, well, I know Dar Sizzle because she showed up to. But it changed from being put in the category of great fishermen to being put in the category of these YouTube people.
Visible people, right? And A-listers.
I got nothing against the YouTube people, but it's just hard to swallow. Like, why would you ask me that? I dedicated my life to catching big fish, and now you want to ask me if I know a G-stringer?
Homie, don't do that.
So I get, the disconnect. I get the dissension, but I really think that you can't hate on it.
No,
you can't hate on it. And I think a lot of people.
It's in the rearview mirror. I mean, it's like any of this stuff. But I did that thing that you're talking about. I naturally made friends with a lot of these women's husbands, manfolk or whatever, and they felt that they could talk to me eye to eye. And they would actually mention names to me, and then they'd apologize for it and say, this is none of their business. And I'd say, no, it is your business. It's your job. I'm still pretty traditionalist to help protect your wife. And if you know that a particular girl you don't feel it's the right company, it's just like you wouldn't let your daughter run with just anybody, you put the stop to it.
Right.
And I know it's a woman's world and nobody does that and we don't love, honor, and obey. But I would come to some sort of a concordance with these guys when I'd say, look, this person has done X, X, and X, and they can't be excluded. They've actually achieved that. But I would always listen, and I learned a lot of stuff, and I'll tell you every last bit of it from some of these old guys that had a lot of money and everything. All the wisdom that came back, it made me a better person to listen to it and stuff a sock in my mouth and listen when these guys talk.
Yeah.
And these lovely wives, and I know a lot of these girls would absolutely busted a diaphragm if they would have heard, if we would have included, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, included the G-stringers.
Yeah.
I mean, don't be afraid to say it. I mean, it is what it is.
It is.
And I'm not hating on the G-stringers, but I will tell you something that is not going to happen with the G-stringers or any of these, it doesn't just have to be G-stringers, it could be any of these social media or YouTube phenoms. You can get the views and the clicks, but you're never going to get the respect that we were talking about 20 minutes ago. Right?
Right.
They're never going to get that respect.
And nobody's going to buy, they'll go ahead and they'll buy one of my $20 books or something like that, but they're not going to go buy a $60 book because unless they go ahead and buy themselves a dictionary or a thesaurus to put alongside it and
Can actually read it.
Read the friggin' thing. and all the good photography that went in there. I didn't shoot it. Shit, my hands shake. The other book that I just did alongside with this, I've had this coming for years. It's a result of a medicine I take. But I got a little tremor. I mean, if I drink a beer, I don't have it. But I mean, I don't want to be driving the streets and doing. I thought about that. But I had the book I did at the same time as this, I did with Stackpole Press, and it was titled Backcountry Flies from Swamp to Surf. And it was a 250 pager or whatever. Pat Ford helped me with some of the photos, but I largely shot them all, and I just learned to speed up my shutter speeds and get a tripod. I had a cheap tripod and shoot them outside or shoot them in the bedroom, and I went and bought a big, what do you call it, lamps, the LED lamps and stuff.
Right.
And I learned about color temperature and all this kind of stuff. And thanks to this guy, Jay Nichols, their acquisitions editor, we made a pretty good book. Of course, fly fishermen never buy anything. Well, they don't. What they do is they have clubs, okay?
And they get their information through the clubs.
No, they go in the club. Now, I can't say this about everybody, but what they'll do is they'll buy one and they'll have a lending library, okay? So they buy one book and I make $2 royalty, and they'll buy the book and they take turns checking it out.
Well, I think being an author and being a fishing guide is pretty similar because, well, not that you can't become a millionaire, but let's just say that we don't necessarily expect to become a millionaire going into these endeavors.
Well, you know the trick of being a fisherman or an author and becoming a millionaire is become a great bullshitter, I think.
Well, why the hell do you think Hemingway is so famous? He might have been the last dude that actually made some dough.
He did. And then he wins the Nobel Prize, and he said it's the worst thing that ever happened to him in his life. He used to, in fact, that remark I used, I sort of stole that. He had a biographer named Hoshner, and Hoshner comes to him and says, "Hey, Hem, thinking about writing myself. What say ye?" He says, "Well, Hem, I don't know. Writing empties a man, and sometimes if he finds there's nothing there, comma, it kills him, period." And he's the one that said, what do you say, what do you think is necessary, the necessary components for becoming a good writer? He said, a not inconsiderable amount of talent. He said, a burning desire, which I have, and an unhappy childhood. And if it would have been for lithium carbonate, he'd still be here. He'd be having a drink with us today.
Well, I mean, being a writer, it's definitely not in my DNA. And it's definitely in yours.
I don't know.
Dude, when you do it and you don't stop, and whether somebody buys your books or don't buy your books, and then you do another one.
Yeah.
And then you come over here with that smile on your face.
I'm smiling. I'm laughing.
You know what I mean?
This is the greatest.
But that's real life. That's good shit.
How lucky are we, how these Christers would say, how blessed are we to live here? You live in this nice house. I live in a nice house. I have a pretty wife. I'm sure yours is, judging from your pretty daughter.
She's family. No, I got a hot wife.
Yeah, no, that's what. And man, you get my age, and that really makes a difference.
Well, that's when you can really appreciate what you got.
That's when you can appreciate, and as a result, it keeps me out of a lot of winding roads of life. It really makes a difference.
You know, I tell people this a lot, and I don't know. The word minority gets thrown around a lot nowadays. You know, minority this, minority that. But growing up in Fort Lauderdale Beach, you are a minority. I don't care what anybody tells you. The bus that took me to school had about 30 kids on it.
Yeah.
Through the whole Los Olas neighborhood, there was about 30 kids that actually lived here and went to school here.
Yeah.
The kids that were on the beach fishing, the kids that were on the beach surfing, we knew every single kid because there wasn't that many there.
No.
And then we had a lifestyle between the bars and the nightlife and the way people made money and the drugs that came in here. And then the way we looked at life was totally different. And I never knew that until I left here and went to school at University of Connecticut.
And this was pretty clean cut, though. I remember when I used to check, I actually checked IDs at the Elbow Room back in the day.
I actually had that job, not for real long. I mean, anybody could do it. I mean, you got free beer and shit like that.
Right.
And all this shit, and overturning beer trucks and the student prints. And, oh, man, I mean, that's my era. There was all kinds of shit. Stuffing cops in trash cans.
But you feel what I'm saying about being a minority by growing up here?
Yeah.
And we were exposed to things that nobody in the country would ever was exposed to.
No,
And I don't mean just the fishing. I mean everything.
No, we had everything, and but you know something. If you think about it, this is going to really get me blackballed. But all the little woods boogers and stuff like that. You know, when the college kids that come down here, you know, the clean cut and football players and all this other shit, all these little roaches and stuff like that would crawl back under the thing for about 8 weeks every winter, and it was safe. You could take your honey for a walk down the beach. It wasn't like it got later on.
No, man, Fort Lauderdale Beach was so special. I mean, it still is, but it's different. I would get my old man up early in the morning at spring break, and I mean early, like 5 o'clock in the morning before the sun went up, and you'd get down there nice and early. And he would drive the pickup truck down A1A, and me and my buddy would pick up the beer cans and throw them in the back of the pickup truck until it was slap full.
Oh yeah.
And then we'd go to the place where they would give you, I forget, it was like 15 cents a pound or whatever they give you.
Yeah.
And we'd get $50 in our pocket, and we'd go buy a reel or go sit on the pier for the rest of the day, and the whole beach smelled like beer. There was beer cans everywhere. And today, people would think that, that was atrocious. But it wasn't atrocious. It was just life, man.
I remember the freaking Coast Guard jetties there by Bahia Mar.
Can you remember that?
Yes, I can remember it. And I remember interviewing Buster Hamilton with his three-legged dog coming in Boyd one morning. And during the war years, over here, they had boats. There was no Bahia Mar, and they used to keep the charter boats over here, Andrews and New River. In fact, Carl Ball's uncle used to have one there. And that's those Quonset huts there. Those were fish processing plants.
And that was what years?
That was up until 1950.
Okay, so in the 40s.
Yeah, and during the Second World War, what they do, nobody had hooks. There was no bait industry. The hooks, the only place they'd get them was from old Oslo and Son in whatever, Norway, okay? And of course, Norway was completely cordoned off, by the Allies. The Germans were fighting, trying to keep they were fighting the Germans in the mountains and stuff, so you couldn't get hooks. So these guys were taking apart plugs. Guys like, I think this is before Wittenborn's time, but I remember some of these guys, and they'd take a piece of like broom handle or lemonwood shovel handle, and they'd trim it on a bevel, and they'd drill a hole through it on a drill press, and they'd paint it some crazy color, yellow with green stripes and stuff. And they'd take this piece of coat hanger wire, and they'd wrap a 9674 Mustad or something on the back of it, and they'd troll these things on sash lines. I'm afraid I'm going to have a reentry problem here if I pull this off my head. But anyway, we'd do this, and they'd go out there and they'd hand jerk, and they'd take these fish, of course, and they'd drive through the Coast Guard inlet over. This is, I think this was around the time that they dug Port Everglades, and they'd take them back over here in town where was a railhead, and the freight cars would unload, and they'd have 200,000 pounds of kingfish, which they blow up the coast up to Fulton's in New York, where they get shipped overseas. Well, I remember Hamilton telling me in the years he did this, there were probably 3 or 4 times. I figured that whole Las Olas thing there was a basin in there. It was a big grass bed. They had cobies would come in there and stuff. But he said, I'll bet you in the 6 or 7 years we did it, he said, I'll bet you I personally caught 5 or 6 kingfish over 50 pounds in there on these lures.
Now, those little rocks that are sitting down there by Bahia Mar, is that really a remnants?
Yeah, you bet your sweet ass it is. Absolutely,
really?
Yeah.
We've debated that over the years. And
no. They used to have an inlet there. The other thing, I remember going down there for 4th of July and stuff, and it was always the same. And they have those, I don't know if they still have them, but they have those like brazier, where they have and you put your charcoal in those grills.
Yeah,
and
they're
stuff.
still down there.
And all of a sudden you'd hear it'd be without fail, you'd hear, it'd be some kid that ran into one of them and tattooed them. Oh,
man.
That was...
Now, that little set of rocks down there, Bahia Mar, I lived at as a teenager, or as younger than a teenager. I mean, our my best friend's mom, God, she was great. She had an old Alfa Romeo, and she would go by Roy's Bait and Tackle and get the shrimps.
I remember Roy's.
And we had two lures we used back then. We had a little tiny yellow bucktail jig, and we used a Reflecto spoon.
Yep.
And the Reflecto spoon had that little yellow feather out the back.
Yep.
So you never knew what the hell you were going to catch on it. You'd catch a pompano one cast on it.
Oh,
You'd
that's
catch
a popular lure at Chuckaluski, yeah.
They still using it in Chuckaluski?
Yeah, I think they do.
Because that Reflect, man, that was the thing. But we would go down there, and every morning, the sun would come up. It didn't matter what time of year it was. Sometimes the snooks were down there. Sometimes the pompanos were down there. The amount of bonefish we caught down there was a lot. And that was just a place for us. And by bicycle, I was about 10 blocks from my house.
Yeah. We had stuff in Wilton Manors up here. There were things. I have guys that I know that I don't think are bullshitters that tell me, like over by the one Catholic church, about in the North Fork of the New River or the Middle River, actually catching in several years of living in Wilton Manors before it, in its prior incarnation, and catching 3 Spanish mackerel there.
Yeah. No, there was I can only remember what I can remember. Most of the stuff, that I did was in the 80s.
Yeah, for me, it was, we came down here in 54, and I remember the first thing, somebody in the neighborhood took me to Anglin's Pier. I remember there was this girl that lived down at the end of the street. Her grandfather, old Pop Higgins, he used to open and close the pier, and he'd take us out there. I forget who, and there was his son or whatever. But I remember watching guys who later became my friends land a big nurse shark. I mean, a big one, like 450. And they used a lemonwood shovel handle. And for a tip, what they did is they took a CO2 cartridge and sawed it off, and they brazed a roller tip on there. And they wrapped the guides on with 72 thread green nylon, and they used hose clamps to put it on there. I mean, the rod would bend. I mean, it was like a davit. It didn't bend at all.
It's more of a winch.
And we used to go up to Hillsborough Inlet, and we'd get those guys. I knew Doug Guy. His kid went to school. Judy Guy went to school with me. And when I got old enough that I could get away with it, we'd sneak in the wharf, and Pete Philly, Pumpin' Pete and I, we'd get up there, and we'd buy these captains, a couple of toddies. That was the wharf. That was the yard arm. The yard arm was up there and these guys would go and they'd save us a couple of bonitas and stuff like that on their boat, and we'd throw them, we'd take them down. And we used to fish off the beach for sharks when you used to be able to get across Wahoo Bay up there at.
And that's old school, Steve. That's old school.
Oh man, this is before the birth of the earth. I'm telling you.
No, that really is. And the other thing that always floored me about growing up here was being, where your life revolved around fishing in the ocean. It broke all barriers. And what I mean by that is some of the people you fish with were multimillionaires.
Right.
On the top of the world. But then again, you were also friends with the guys that had nothing. They would fish out of the back of their cars.
Right.
And anywhere in between. But because you were into fishing.
It was the great leveler.
It was.
Presidents and felons together.
Right. It put everybody together. It put everybody in the same, I don't want to say same playing field, but you never thought like that guy didn't belong or you didn't belong.
Yeah.
Dude, you guys just went fishing.
Guys have like these intersecting circles. I mean, it's girls. It's like, the what do you call it? Vassar grads or something like that. Like, oh God, sorry we missed you. We'll catch you in San Tropez this year. That kind of stuff. But guys, I mean, we have guys that want to watch football with us. We have guys that want to watch whatever. There's guys we want to watch Tarsissel. I mean, there's all sorts of groups of guys.
Yeah, no, it's a funny place. We always, it was you just never knew where the next guy was coming from, who he was going to be. He might be the president's son. He might be, somebody that.
We had some doozies.
Bartender's kid. Who knows? Anywhere in between. And it was just such a great place.
we had doozies. There were some that were a little on the darker side of things, but that's the one thing. When I wrote a little copy for this little pre-press for this book, and I said, this book basically women from every conceivable social and educational strata. I mean, some of these girls didn't have a pot. Some of these girls, the first thing they ever caught was a sandworm. Pardon me, with her. Pardon me, but some of these girls. Oh Christ, I can't remember the names of the colleges. These girls that wouldn't give me a second look, probably. At that age. But when that's what they like.
We're going to wrap this up in a few minutes, but before we do, when I called you on the phone to come over here, and you were awfully nice about it and everything, but you said something to me that has been in my mind since, and you told me that in all your life work with being an author and teaching people to fish, and you said it's in the last few years you're getting just more phone calls than you ever have, and that you're getting recognized more than you've ever been, and you have like a lifetime worth of achievements that are actually coming to tuition.
After 40 years of begging and scraping, I'm an overnight success.
Yeah, that's what you told me. Can you elaborate just a little bit?
Yeah, it's what I said before. I think what I did is I pulled out the stops. I figure I is what I is, and I think that it's by exactly what you've been reiterating. It's about telling the truth. Hemingway used to call making it one true sentence. And if people realize me the way I am, and I'm not comporting myself according to, I don't have Miss Vicky here with a switch or whatever. And I'm telling the story, and on the one hand, I don't feel that I'm qualified to instruct anyone how to write. There is a man named William Zinsser who writes a book titled On Writing Well, and anyone who would wish to pursue this as a craft, you can probably get that for $10 or less from whatever. But the other stuff is really letting it go. And we live in this age, terms like fake news and all this other stuff. And I mean, how can people live with this? I mean, it is what it is. I mean, there are certain immutable laws of nature. And I mean, I told the one, I think, I thought your earphones were going to blow up, but I said, what's the secret to my success? I wouldn't call myself I'm at least a functional alcoholic, if anything else. I like drinking wine at night. I suffer from bipolar disorder, and I take the medicine. And as I look back, maybe there were parts of my life that weren't happy, but it wasn't bothering me then, and I always got along with people. And the other thing with this stuff is I've got a weakness for, I mean, I love my wife, and I try to keep it, within the bounds. But I have a weakness for that, for the leg. Yeah,
you got a weakness for women. Imagine that.
Yeah. I mean, these guys. I mean, I don't care if it's toxic or whatever. Give me another shot.
Steve, I can't thank you enough for coming over and doing the podcast with me. And I just want to thank you for being a real guy.
Thanks.
You know what I mean? Because there's not too many people. Okay, what am I looking at here? I got to put my glasses on again.
Tell them, or I can tell them right here. The only way to get 50 women, do not look for it at the Borders or anywhere else or on Amazon. The only way you can get it is to order it from Tom Pero, the publisher. The way you do it is simply Google the phrase, "Why Women Fish." .com, and you'll get the coolest website, and it'll let you do stuff. Or also, you can Google wildriverpress.com and speak to Pero. Okay. It's what we did here is basically a 3-man operation, or 4. I mean, Pero, the guy who basically the layout guy, me, and Pero has his girlfriend. I mean, they take the orders, but these books are shipped directly. These are heavy cardstock. It's a $60 book. It's not, not for the faint-hearted. But
yeah, if you got a few bucks and you want to read stuff from a real guy, what I did today is I just Googled Steve Kantner, and when I did that, I found the book and I read a little bit about the book, and I knew that was the last one that you published.
Yeah,
and it was pretty simple to do it. I'm glad you wrote the book because, like I said, those G-stringers have kind of murkied the water, especially for the young.
And of course, I had to do a lot of research on that. I had to on how murky the water was. I had to look at that before we made our selection. That was very important.
Well, there's a local woman in town that I've reached out, and I think she's going to do a podcast with her. I don't know if you've met her before, but it's Sandra McMillan. Do you know who that is?
Yes, I know who she is. I do not know her.
I've been watching her for a long time, and she's got a boat that
it's a big Spencer.
Right, and it's just, dude, it's nice.
Yeah.
And I
should remember the Billfish Foundation.
Yeah. I grew up in my dad built the custom boats, and I've always been a big fan of that. So the first thing I recognized was the boat. And then I learned a lot about Sandra, and I learned that, she's basically dedicated a good part of her, adult life into fishing for sailfish and being competitive in the sailfish series. And I just like that so much because she's actually a real woman doing real things and cares about the fishery and whatever comes across her plate or whatever, she prioritizes everything in her life around that. And that's real guy stuff.
Yeah.
And she's right here. She's right down the street. And no one knows who the hell she is unless you're in the billfish scene. She's not a G-stringer. She's a mom. She's got a bunch of kids. She's did a great job with the kids. I followed her through social media. I can't wait to get her in here. And I got a feeling she's going to like the book. So anyway, Steve.
Well, let me say,
Go ahead.
if things really work out and we do a sequel, maybe we can get her in there.
Well, whether you can get her in there or not, I mean, she knows, the value of what you wrote about, if anybody. I mean, and, you don't have to get everybody in the book, but it's just good that you wrote that stuff, make people realize that, hey, they're real sportswomen.
Yeah.
And they'll compete with the best of us.
Mia Hamm, 20 years ago, who knew? Barbara Kersey Joyner, who knew? Chrissy Everett, who knew? Who cared?
Yeah, it's a thing, and you hit it right on the head with the book. So congratulations on that. I hope it's a great seller for you.
Me too.
It's impressive. It's a hardcover. You don't see
314 pages, I think, 200 and some full color big illustrations.
He put the real work and effort into it. This isn't one of like the new ebooks or whatever. It's a quality piece. And Steve, thanks so much for being part of the Reel Guy Network. Whether you know it or not, you've been in the network for a long time.
Okay.
You were in the Reel Guy Network, and people got to know about you when we won that small battle at the beach. And I'm glad you're in the network. And thanks for coming over and spending some time with us.
That was terrific.
Great podcast, pal.